I think the teachers and the students are the stars of today because they've done so much work and they've come so far, and we're all really excited for their achievements. So without further ado, why don't we start?
Sure, thank you.
So, Dr. Ko, or if you don't mind, maybe I'll call you
Owen. Call me Owen, please.
You were a winner in 2004 of the very first Hang Lung Mathematics Award. Yeah. How did you get interested in mathematics, and why did you make the jump to neuroscience?
So initially, the sequence of events, I was actually initially attracted to biomedical sciences first, and then I was falling in love with mathematics. So eventually, I decided to develop a career in a relatively more quantitative field in biomedical science, with the choice for me, which is neuroscience. So I would say that during my career or early years, when I was during my childhood, there were one person and two events that fundamentally influenced my career choices. The first one was Dr. David Ho, the pioneer who advocated what we call cocktail therapy for HIV infection. So when I was a kid, I was spending a lot of time wandering in libraries, and back then the Hong Kong Central Library in Causeway Bay was still very new. That was my happen of surfing the internet. Read a lot about Dr. David Ho. I kind of idolized him, thinking that what he's doing is really cool. It's very meaningful. It's contributing to advancement of human health care. So why don't I also try to develop something like that? And then as I become more senior in high school, in my last year in high school, the two events I was referring to are, first of all, participation, of course, in Hang Lung Mathematics Award, and secondly, participation in a mathematics course called Enrichment Program for Young Mathematics Talents. That's a very useful course held by Chinese University of Hong Kong, and enrolling gifted or relatively gifted high school students to learn some simple undergraduate mathematics. I still remember that in high school when I first learned calculus, I was really amazed by the method. The idea of calculus was super clever, I think. And by participating in the Hang Lung Mathematics Award and competition and enrichment program for young mathematicians, course, I got to know quite a few very talented mathematicians, including quite a few of the distinguished guests who were my teachers back then. And so after getting into medical school and learning that neuroscience is actually a very quantitative field, because perhaps not many people know that the 1963 Nobel Prize in Medicine was actually awarded to a mathematical model used for describing how neurons, the cells in our brain, generate nerve impulses. And then I was like, okay, I'll do it.
That's incredible. That's an incredible story. So many of you might wonder why we're bringing Dr. Ko here today. It's not only was he a participant in the 2004 and a winner, but he's also a widely published scientist and academician. So you've been published in Science. You won the silver medal, the silver award at the Eppendorf and Science Prize for Neurobiology. Maybe can you give us an example, maybe in layman's terms, because not all of us here are neuroscientists. What was your published paper about, and what are you most excited about?
My previous work that led me to that award was all about how the brain works in a very general way of speaking it. So if we look at the brain as a computational device, if we want to understand how this device works, so we often talk about we're trying to analyze the brain at three different levels. The first one is what we call computational level, meaning that we want to understand what are the computational goals of the brain as a device. For example, when you look at me, one of your goals is recognize me as Owen. So that's a computational goal. And secondly, the second level is algorithmic level. So what algorithm does the brain use to recognize certain features? For example, when you look at me, your brain actually first detect edges on my face, like my eyebrow, and then you assemble an internal representation of me in your brain and associate that to the name Owen Ko. And thirdly, we want to know, okay, how does the brain then have the physical implementation in order to use certain algorithm to achieve a certain computational goal? And the previous work that got me the prize was all about implementation level, how neurons are wired together. So before my work, there was actually a long-standing hypothesis in the field saying that a general rule describing how neurons connect is that if they fire together, they're supposed to wire together. And there were also controversy about whether the same kind of connectivity scheme, how neurons wire together, is conserved from larger mammals to smaller rodents. So my experimental work provided, first of all, the most direct experimental evidence for that, that neurons that fire together in the brain do wire together. And secondly, we proved that the connectivity principle, that kind of scheme, is actually conserved from a larger mammal to small animals. Yeah.
So are we seeing this applied today in things like facial recognition? Many of you use iPhones, right? I mean, facial recognition, is that similar? Is that applicable?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of ways that they are analogous or similar. Because, nowadays we are, machine learning or artificial intelligence is a very big field, and one of the most successful algorithm or a computing architecture that's being deployed is what we call deep learning. That's getting a lot of media coverage on the news headlines. And deep learning, that kind of computing structure, is actually loosely based on biological neurons. It's actually biology inspired. And deep learning, of course, itself is actually heavily reliant on mathematics. The underlying algorithm for optimizing this kind of computing architecture in order to solve real-world problems is based on calculus developed centuries ago, and some numerical optimization methods developed all the way back starting in 1950s.
Yeah. So you're showing us that mathematics is being applied very clearly to many of our everyday uses and devices.
Yes.
So coming back to the audience today, which are many of them students and teachers, what would your advice be to some of the students here today in improving their mathematic rigor or in future careers? How can mathematics open new career doors for them?
Oh, I would first of all congratulate all the students here first, because the fact that you're invited and sitting here today already means you're doing very well. So please keep up with the effort. And I think if you decide that you want to embark a career or have your first degree in mathematics, that's a very wise decision. I'm not saying that just because of we have so many mathematicians here, but it is true, because as you progress along your career, if at some point you want to try something other than mathematics, you realize that the application of mathematics actually come very natural. Take the example of medicine. If we ever want to advance medicine, and one of the key things is that we want to automate processes more, we want to develop systems that can help clinicians diagnose diseases or real-time monitoring patients' condition, predict their outcome. That's based on AI, based on deep learning. Then you realize that if you know mathematics, you would really understand how that system works instead of being just a user. So if you want to do mathematics as an undergraduate degree, that's a very wise decision. If you do not want to do that, I still recommend that you try to keep up with your quantitative skills as much as possible, because that would give you a distinct advantage in the future. And to me, I pretty much think that mathematics is the new English.
Wow. Yeah. That's a very bold statement. So you're living proof that having a good foundation in mathematics can open many doors. In your case, it's to medicine and neurobiology. Yes. If you were to go back in time to 2004, right when you won the award, what would your advice be to your younger self?
I would probably advise myself to be more confident, and secondly, be more open-minded about what contribution means. Maybe because when I was young, I was reading too much about the child prodigies or talents like John von Neumann and Terence Tao. I was always under the impression that only geniuses like that can make enough contribution to science, or significant contribution to science. And the single question that was bugging me the most during my childhood was whether I was intelligent enough to make any contribution in science. And I grew out of that. I realized that apart from certain level of intelligence, other key attributes matter a lot, especially perseverance. You gotta have the stamina, because doing research, being a scientist, is a marathon. It's not a 100-meter sprint. So that's one key thing. And that if one's reasonably good and have enough stamina, perseverance, one can still make some contribution. And I hope I'll be able to make more. And secondly, be more open-minded about what contribution means, because being a scientist is not just about sitting there solving hardcore problems or hiding in the lab. It's also about how you nurture the next generation, how you teach the young talents of the next generation, how do you nurture them, and how you share your knowledge with other people in the society, so that we can together achieve a better world.
That's fantastic. So, do you keep up with your mathematics skills? I mean, do you still do equations, or I mean, how do you practice what you do today, or are you too busy with your assistant professorship?
Oh, these days I'm really too busy. But I was keeping the habit of because I got into medical school, but I still took a few undergraduate mathematics courses when I was in China University, and I kept the habit of studying one undergraduate mathematics textbook until I was first or second year of my PhD, when I got really too busy to keep doing that.
That's fantastic. So maybe I'll close with the final question. We've got so many influential guests here today, from academicians to the Honorable CE and many others. Do you have anything you'd like to say about the state of mathematics in Hong Kong? What can we do better? Or do you have any comments that you think would be worth this audience to hear?
Oh, I just learned that the number of people hired by Tsinghua University, the number of mathematicians hired in 1 year, is equivalent to the size of whole department in China University. So perhaps if financially feasible, I certainly wish that society will have more support in expanding mathematics department, and of course science as well.
Well, thank you, Owen.
Thank you so much.
Really enlightening. I hope that you find even more success.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Koh and Mr. Chan, for the lively conversation.